All right, well, we've got a few folks still signing in, but we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank everyone for being here this morning. I'm James Yorkey, I'm the County Administrator, and this is the second of two open house sessions that we're having to share information about our capital improvement plan process. So, and I see some familiar faces here. We did have our first open house back on December 1st. At that point, we shared with you information about the condition of our facilities. We'd done a comprehensive building audit and looked at the condition of all of our buildings, mechanical systems, building envelope, et cetera. And so, and at that point, we also collected feedback from the folks who attended the workshop to see what people were thinking about the information we had gathered and to really try to use that feedback to inform the process. So where we are today is we'd like to share with you what we've come up with since then, which is to take that information about building needs and start to translate that into a plan, including costing out what it's going to take to make improvements to our buildings. One thing that we emphasized a lot in the first session is that we have a long history of deferring maintenance on our buildings, and that has led to situations in all of our buildings where we were behind on repairing things and keeping things up. And as a long-term strategy, that's not a good place to be. It entails a lot of additional cost. If you're keeping up with things and you're addressing, if you've got equipment replacement schedules, for example, you're keeping up with things and you're addressing problems before they occur. And that's really where we want to be. So what we're going to do today is share with you, again, the information that we've developed since our last meeting, talking about some of the costs that are going to be involved in getting our buildings up to snuff. We're also going to be talking about some of our space needs. We talked about the fact last time that we have limited space in the law enforcement center so that there's not adequate room for evidence processing and storage. We have a sally port that is the garage bay there that is way too small for the squads that the sheriff's deputies currently use, so they can't actually pull straight into the bay to load and unload inmates. And so there are a number of needs that need to be addressed, and what we wanted to do today is share information about some of the cost estimates that we've developed and get your feedback on some scenarios about how we could move forward. And so that's kind of the goal for today. The format today is going to be the same as it was last time. So we'll have a presentation at the beginning, and then that's going to be about 20 minutes perhaps. That could be longer. But then we're going to break up into groups. We've got 3 stations today where we're going to be talking about kind of getting caught up on those maintenance needs. We're also going to talk about space needs and some of the scenarios that we're thinking about. And we, again, nothing's carved in stone. We really want your feedback to inform the finalization of the plan. And then we're going to be talking about some of the ways that we could pay for the work that needs to be done. So that's the agenda for this morning. Are there any questions before we move on? I should mention too, we are putting this on video so that folks who cannot be present today will have, will have the opportunity to view the video on our website at a later time and provide feedback that way. So, any questions? Seeing none, I will turn it over to Chad Rickel, who is our principal in charge of the development of the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan.
All right, thank you. Oops. Okay. Thank you, James, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. I see some familiar faces from early December. So again, I'm Chad Rickel with CRBPS. We've been doing the study over the last 6-7 months now, I think. And today, before I jump into anything, I just want to let you know that Terry Ryla, the architect on our team who's been doing the heavy lift on the space needs, is unfortunately under the weather and is not able to be here today. So I still have Kaya and Lucas with me from my team, and we will be able to have discussions and answer questions with you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on our architect not being here today. So what we're going to do today is, as James mentioned, we have 3 stations that we're going to be at, and I'm going to walk you through what all of those stations have for information that we're going to share. We do have handouts in the back, so please make sure to grab a handout. There's way more detailed information here in the handout, but we also have poster boards, as you see, and I'm going to walk you through all the poster boards here on the presentation. So, since we have 3 stations, I'll start with Station 1. Station 1 essentially is going to be 2 poster boards, or 2 things that we're going to discuss. First off, we wanted to provide some feedback on what we learned at the first engagement session from the surveys. So we received 22 surveys from that first engagement session, and these are the key points that we fleshed out of all of those surveys. So, and you'll notice the number of mentions from those surveys. So facilities need to be prioritized based on frequency and use of criticality to county functions. And I apologize for reading from the slide, but I think it's important just to go through this. So, secondly, sustainability, efficiency, and long-term thinking are important when planning for the future. Thirdly, the county should work to move from reactive to proactive maintenance. Maintaining detailed facility data is important for making informed decisions, and community engagement is critical to the success of any long-term plan. We feel that we've done a very good job of addressing all of these, and we'll be willing to have more of a discussion today at the stations when we talk about the new information that we have to share. The other part of Station 1 we are going to talk about, and James mentioned this, we're going to talk about the 5-year maintenance needs based on the facility assessments that we did. And there is another handout back there from the first engagement session, which has, so that's the leftover handouts from the last engagement session. And that has all that information in regard to our process and how we got that data. And of course, that's what we shared with all of you at the first engagement session. And now we're moving into being able to get more detailed in regard to the investment that is needed over the next 5 years. So right now we are prioritizing the courthouse and the law enforcement center based on the maintenance needs as well as the space needs within the departments. So we're going to jump into that a little bit. But then on the right-hand side, you see a couple of the other departments that have some investment. Obviously, all the buildings have some investment needed based on some of the deferred maintenance. But going forward, we wanted to break all of that out. And in the handout, you'll see each facility with the investment, the 5-year maintenance need that we're looking at. And I should say, before I move to Station 2, Brian Silence, the maintenance director here with the county, and Lucas Mason, an engineer at CRBPS, will be at Station 1 to answer questions and talk with everybody as you work through to the stations. At Station 2, I will be there with Kaya. Kaya is a facility assessor at CRBPS. I've essentially been the project manager on this project, and we'll be standing at Station 2, which is across the hallway here, and we'll be able to talk with you about Station 2. So Station 2 essentially is going to roll out some options to you. We've come up with 3 different options based on facility needs and space needs. I do want to be clear before I start showing these options that these are not final designs. As I stated at the first session back in December, we do not do the design work. It's a conflict of interest for us to assess your buildings, give you the data, and then expect to score a design project at the end of this. What we are here to do is provide you with some options and ideas with the intention that we want to get your feedback today. So we want to share this information with you, and then there are surveys back there, just like engagement session number 1, and I encourage all of you to fill out a survey before you leave today. You'll also have the ability to fill out a survey from home, but I want to encourage all of you to do that. All right, so option 1, and like I said, there's 3 options here. So first off, the county courthouse. This is option 1, provides a renovation of the county courthouse. That renovation would provide There's no additions to this building. The renovation would provide more office space, and we know that PHHS has serious needs in regard to lack of space. So we would renovate the courthouse for more office space, and we would move all of the court functions to the law enforcement center. So you'll see on the right-hand side here, the courtroom, the attorney's office, all the court functions would go to a second-story addition at the law enforcement center. And then we also have the law enforcement addition. And the law enforcement addition would serve 4 things, essentially. There would be emergency operations center, dedicated space for the EOC. There would be that Sallyport expansion that James mentioned a little while ago. Evidence processing and storage would be expanded. There's a huge need for that. And then there's also more office space for the law enforcement department. The second option would be an addition here at the courthouse. So on the north side of the building, it would be a 2-story addition. That would serve more office space, primarily for PHHS, as well as other departments. And then we would maintain the court functions here as is. And then there would also be that law enforcement addition that I mentioned in option 1, serving those needs at the law enforcement department. And then there's option 3, which is very similar to option 2. The only difference really from option 2 to option 3 is that the addition on the courthouse on the north side of the building is a little bit different. It's a 2nd-story addition with underground covered space for fleet vehicles, for county fleet vehicles. So covered parking underneath, and then the addition up on the 2nd level. Again, more office space helping with the need for PHHS. And then just like with every option, we have the law enforcement addition to serve the needs of the law enforcement department. Along with those options, we did some cost estimates. So you'll notice here, and station 3 will be right here, so we have the poster boards behind me as well. We do have cost estimates for the 3 options that I just rolled out to everybody. I do want to be clear in regard to these cost estimates. They do include the maintenance needs as well. So this is kind of an all-in number based on the estimate. You would be addressing the facility maintenance needs of these 2 facilities, as well as addressing the renovation or the addition projects that we've provided in these options.
Maintenance needs going out for many years?
5 years.
Does that include staff, additional staff, or like day maintenance, custodial, that kind of stuff?
In regard to these costs?
Yeah.
No, that was not factored into the cost. Any other questions? Okay. James, I'm going to hand it back to you for the funding discussion.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. This is still working. All right. Just want to make sure I didn't turn anything off. All right. So these are big numbers that we're talking about, and that's why we're having this process, because this would be a big step for the county to take. And I think, the first open house meetings that we had, we talked quite a bit about the need for additional space at the law enforcement center, and the fact that we're really overcrowded here at the courthouse. So these are general ideas that we're talking about. And because they are general, the cost estimates are, we try to be very conservative. And so the cost estimates on the last slide are really what we think are probably pretty high-end estimates. We would expect that the actual cost to be lower, but of course a lot depends on the timing and what happens to interest rates and so on moving forward. So we've made our best guess, our best estimate as to what these costs might be. But in terms of covering those costs, we don't have $17 million sitting around in our reserves. So obviously we would need to do bonding to be able to pay for these projects. I do want to mention that we do have already in the budget about $455,000 annually for maintenance and also to go into our capital reserve fund. So, and in that capital reserve fund, we currently have about $407,000. So we have been saving money to pay for some of these maintenance needs. Obviously, it would not be enough to cover the full cost, but if we do need to bond, there's already money in the levy to pay for servicing the debt. The other thing to note, we do have some new American Rescue Plan funding that we just learned about last fall. At this week's board meeting, the board voted to allocate $700,000 of that funding to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority for new housing projects, because that is, I think we all agree, the #1 priority for our community. But we do have about $1.3 million that has not been budgeted yet. And it's been, I think, well, I know it's been my expectation, and I think the board is on board with using a good portion of that funding for our capital improvements. Now, how much of it it'll ultimately be, we haven't really landed on a figure yet, but that is a source of funding that is available. The other thing to note is that we have been working with the U.S. Forest Service and Lake and St. Louis counties to try to address the appraisal that went into the new payment in lieu of taxes numbers that we got from the feds back in 2018. That appraisal initially came in much lower than the previous appraisal, which means that we've been having to set aside a substantial portion of what we've been getting since 2018 in the event that we might have to pay it back to the federal government. So we are, again, hopeful that we will get a better reappraisal. We're still, right now, our rebuttal to the most recent appraisal is with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we're expecting to get some feedback from them on the coming months on what the actual payment in lieu of taxes will be moving forward. We're also talking to our legislative delegation, our federal legislative delegation, to try to resolve that in a more favorable way. So the other thing in the current legislative session in St. Paul is that we are working through the Association of Minnesota Counties to try to get some movement on adjusting county program aid and state payments in lieu of taxes. That would add, if those go our way, and we have reason to believe that they will, would add over $200,000 a year of funding to our budget. I mentioned bonding. Obviously, the county can issue general obligation bonds if we need to, but there's a state bonding bill that's currently being worked on that could provide some access through state channels. And I talked recently with Commissioner Dave Mills, who is going to be reaching out to our folks in St. Paul to see if there's an opportunity for us to get something into that bill that would enable us to cover some of these costs. And I think for probably a lot of you who were part of this process the last time around in 2017, 2018, again, bonding would be the way the county would issue probably general obligation bonds to help pay for these projects, and then the debt service would be covered. Mostly, there might need to be some new levy dollars, and I'm asking Brady Powers to provide some information on that. And so that's not known at this point. And really, what we're wanting today is to get sort of general feedback on, number one, do the scenarios that we're talking about here make sense? Are there questions about those? And then also any feedback that you would have about funding mechanisms to make these projects happen. So the next steps moving forward after today, we're going to be using the feedback we get today to finalize the development of the CIP. And again, we'll be updating the county's financial management plan to provide a strategy for financing any projects. And there will be more opportunities. That will be a public discussion with the county board. And so as that moves forward and we have more detail on what the numbers look like, we'll be sharing that with the board, and there will be an opportunity for the public, of course, always to come to board meetings and provide feedback on that. The other thing that's really important is we are in the process of developing a building information management system. Rowan Watkins, our director of IT, and Kyle Oberg, who's our whiz-bang GIS, our Geographic Information System person, are working on developing a system to help us manage all the information that we've collected on our buildings. It's great to have the information, but if you don't use it, if you can't manage it effectively, it doesn't really have value. And so that's something that we're working on, and Rowan and Kyle can share more information about that when we break up into groups. Again, once we have your feedback on the concepts, we'll be working to finalize a plan that we can bring forward to the board that the board will approve. And then once that is done, then we'll be able to start the process of actually developing designs and putting out requests for proposals. So we've covered a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. I'm sure there are lots of questions. I should mention there are some folks here who, if you have specific questions about the changes to the Law Enforcement Center, moving from that to more of like a Justice Center. Sheriff Pat Eliason is here, and then also our County Attorney Molly Hicken is here. And I've spoken with both of them about the ins and outs of developing a Justice Center. I think there's generally support for co-locating those functions. I think there are a lot of efficiencies that we would realize by doing it that way. And they can speak more to kind of how that would look from their perspectives. So, having said that, we will be breaking into groups. If there are any questions, I would be happy to entertain those now. I have answered all your questions. Well, great, we can adjourn. Okay. So again, 3 stations. We'll have CRBPS staff and county staff at each station to discuss what we're proposing with you and to field your questions. So.
And again, there's more detail in the handout, and I'm sure you'll have questions about that, and we can talk through all of that at the stations as well.
Is this
All right.
a plan for how to go to the various stations?
Yeah, so good question. So the stations are set up. Station 1 is out in